They say you never forget your first. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game being a beautiful mess of thousands of cards, there's bound to be a deck for everyone. Of course, when I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! With my brothers and the neighbor kids, my deck really was just a pile of whatever cards looked the coolest. Having a nickname like Rex, I'd always been one of those dinosaur and dragon kids, so that's of course the deck I made. Someday I'll try to remember exactly what cards I shoved into that stack, but the first real deck I ever built was Gusto. After accidentally starting the Yu-Gi-Oh! Resurgence at my school, I needed to up my game with a deck that could actually do something, aside from just summon a level 4 beater every turn. This was around the time Hidden Arsenal 5 was being stocked in stores alongside Hidden Arsenal 6. If you don't know, these are some of the smaller sets in Yu-Gi-Oh! Only having 60 cards in total and 5 cards per pack. At least every card was a holo. They brought in archetypes that had been part of the Dual Terminal series, and they were actually connected in some deep lore that existed outside the card game. The monsters included in the set were Steel Swarm, Vylon, Gem Knights, Laval, Gishki, and Gusto. Really, if you had to buy Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards through only packs, it was a pretty beneficial way to do it with Hidden Arsenal like this. With it being a smaller set, the lower end monsters showed up pretty often, and the big monsters weren't much worse. If you also had friends who were buying the same packs and were trying to build a different deck, then that increased the number of cards being pulled, and you could just trade each other. Anyway, I chose the cool green deck with the funny birds and the cute girls. I won't dive much into the lore of Gustos just yet because it really involves the dual terminal lore as a whole, which continues for a few years and ties in other archetypes. The basics are that the Gusto are a tribe of spiritual people who live alongside their bird partners, with whom they can create a powerful psychic link to power up for battle. Personally, as a Pokemon fan, I really love this idea going in, especially because most of the main deck monsters were small and appeared harmless, but could allow me to build up into stronger synchro monsters. Sure, there were some other cool monsters in here, but they weren't all extremely useful. The best strategy for this deck was to rely on the Searchers and other psychic monster support to synchro summon and maintain advantage over your opponent. The core of the deck was Gusto Eagle, Gusto Goldo, and Winda, Priestess of Gusto. They all search each other out when they're destroyed in different contexts. After that, the easiest monster to synchro for is Gusto Goldo, which allows you to shuffle cards from your graveyard back into the deck to destroy an opponent's monster. Hidden Arsenal 6 gave us more tuners like Gusto Falco and another Searcher in Kamui, Hope of Gusto, and another extremely powerful boss monster, Gusto's Freeze, which makes your opponent take the battle damage that you would from Gusto monsters, making for some very funny OTKs. All in all, it really fit my playstyle, though you might notice that I never brought up Cam, Serenity of Gusto, which allows you to shuffle cards from your graveyard back into the deck and draw a card, and that's because she was a secret rare, so I never really pulled her. I always thought Winda was cuter anyway. Look, I would never have a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card waifu, that's cringe and totally not the kind of behavior Konami is trying to prey upon by constantly printing cards.
A crush on a card? Of course not! That's just plain irrational, illogical, ridiculous!
But yeah, for a while this was my signature deck. I used it against friends during lunch period and after school and brought it to the janky local tournament at the card store, and that place is a whole story on its own. The point is that it wasn't really all that competitive, so I frequently topped with my wonky Gusto deck. Throughout the years, the archetype would continue to get more support here and there, even pretty recently, so it has stuck around as one of my pet decks. And with the later release of the Ritual Beast archetype, which continues both the legacy and the lore of Gusto monsters, it was an instant must-play for me. Ritual Beast have a pretty similar theme where it's all about humans and animals forming a psychic bond, just that it focuses on fusion monsters rather than synchros. But what I love most about it is that characters like Kamui returned as new monsters that were now integral to the deck. And even Winda is back and she's got massive anime thought. Being one of the first decks I owned, it only made sense for it to be the focus of quite a few videos on my original channel. I'm really glad to say that not only was it one of the first good decks I actually built, but it ended up becoming one of my favorites too. Unfortunately, I haven't really been keeping it updated, you know, because it's just an okay deck. Nowadays I'm much quicker to commit abhorrent sins in order to synchro summon, but maybe this is the time I get the deck back up and running for Yu-Gi-Oh! Nights with the boys. But let me know what you think about Gusto and what your first real deck was. You know, the first one that actually had a coherent strategy. Do you still own and play it, or do you need to pay an old friend a visit as well? Anyway, this is GatorX, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all later.